Hi, my name is Kyla. I'm an environmental science student here at the University of Oregon. And over the past summer, I conducted research on eelgrass in the Coos Estuary with the Sutherland Lab here at the University of Oregon. We looked more specifically at how water conditions might affect eelgrass and how we might be incorrectly looking and thinking about water conditions in the estuary. So to start off, why do we care about eelgrass? Well, it's a keystone species, and more specifically, it's an ecosystem engineer. So it creates habitat, it creates foraging grounds, it prevents erosion, it regulates water parameters, it provides a whole bunch of useful ecosystem services here in the Coos Estuary and elsewhere across the coasts of Western North America and beyond. So when we're looking at eelgrass specifically, we're thinking about, how is it protecting our coastlines, especially in the wake of rising sea levels? How is it providing habitat and food for endangered marine animals? And so we're looking at these kind of common eelgrass as a very broadly beneficial foundation species. As you can see here in figure one, there's a little jellyfish residing amongst the eelgrass. This is just one example of many interesting organisms that I saw when I was out in the field studying this eelgrass. I did some kind of informal wildlife surveys while I was out there, and there was a lot of interesting creatures to be found in the surrounding vicinity. So these ecosystems really are made much richer by the existence of these eelgrass beds. Unfortunately, eelgrass beds have become susceptible to an affliction called eelgrass wasting disease, which occurs when the plant experiences excess levels of stress. This can be caused by a variety of factors. Largely, it's assumed to be caused by excessive temperature, making it more susceptible to infection, and also by an inability to obtain nutrients. And this may be caused by kind of an influx of excessive sediment in the water column, which blocks out sunlight from reaching the plant and makes photosynthesis more difficult. Um, Previous research in the South Slough or the Coos Estuary have sought to kind of understand how water fluctuations might affect these populations, but we kind of asked questions about the accuracy of the data sources for this research. How accurate are monitoring stations that are closer to the center of a fairly deep channel, when in reality, eelgrass beds, due to their photosynthetic nature, tend to reside on the shallower kind of edges of the channel so that they can still reach up to close to the surface of the water and still photosynthesize. So our real question here was, if we conduct a match pairs test and we look at water conditions actually in the eelgrass beds versus water conditions at these monitoring stations, which tend to be deeper out and tend to be a bit more removed from the specific vicinity of these eelgrass beds, what differences will we find? So that was the main objective of the study, which was to conduct an audit of this data source and to see how well that data mapped onto data that I was able to collect. Um, so this research, much like the research it was based upon and inspired upon, was situated within the South Slough of the Coos Estuary, which is found on the southern Oregon coast. I sampled water parameters at three Zostera marina beds at each of two sampling locations, which were the two places where monitoring stations already existed, the Charleston Bridge and Velino Island. And Velino Island is important because a marine heat wave struck the area a little while back, and a lot of the eelgrass in that area died off. So we were kind of curious in seeing, specifically targeting this area as it is being focused on as a conservation area for eelgrass. Data I collected with a multi-parameter meter included temperature, pH, salinity in parts per thousand, and total dissolved solids in parts per thousand. And this data was collected approximately 2.5 centimeters below the water's surface, which is where a lot of the eelgrass blades trail along the surface as they're kind of soaking up that sunlight and photosynthesizing. I also collected location data at these sites and used aerial data to kind of hand map all the Zostera marina beds in the entirety of the South Slough. And this just really kind of helped provide a resource as to where the beds are at today compared to historic data and how we might want to target conservation and monitoring efforts going forward. So my results indicated that in July, temperature and pH were significantly variable and higher, and salinity was lower in the Zostera marina beds than actually at the monitoring stations. But in August, the trends kind of flipped, and the bed parameters were nearly uniformly lower than at the monitoring stations. There were some outliers, but in general, what I found was that data did vary between the hand collected shoreline data versus the monitoring data towards the center of the channel. And so this really showed the importance and kind of answered our research question of yes, the water conditions do vary between beds and stations, and helped us inform our approach going forward of how are we going to more accurately predict the conditions that will be experienced in these eelgrass beds. This is important because if we want to better conserve these eelgrass beds, better predict where they will be able to be successful as we're trying to encourage these replanting and these regeneration efforts following things like marine heat waves, we want to actually understand the water conditions in the beds themselves. And this is a very complex issue due to kind of ocean cycling processes and how temperature affects water in different locations, how it travels through the water column, how sediments are transported, and the inflows and outflows of water can cause for some very complex systems to understand. But we kind of find that things get less complicated the closer you go to the source, and that if we really want to be successful in looking at how water parameters are impacting eelgrass. We do want to get closer to the source, and we do want to try and collect more data on the ground amidst these eelgrass beds. So that was the main finding of my study. I also produced a map of all the eelgrass that I could find visually using satellite data in the South Slough, and this is just another valuable resource, kind of pointing towards next directions of where we should focus the kind of monitoring and sampling efforts that I call for kind of amidst the shallower parts of the channel. And so with all of this kind of research and data, we hope to better inform conservation and management strategies going forward so that this important keystone and ecosystem engineer species can continue to provide all of the important benefits that serve our coastlines and our shores.